Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. Hopefully all of you had a fantastic Labor Day break. There's no break for me. Mondays during the football season are always busy, so no days off in that regard, which is kind of topical. Last night, Bill Belichick, he made that line famous, no days off. His team, North Carolina, took a day off against a Big 12 team. TCU hammered North Carolina. That was quite the game for TCU and the Big 12 at large. BYU will look to have that similar success against their ACC foe this week as BYU gets ready to take on the Stanford Cardinal. We'll set the stage for that matchup here on the show, but we've got to start things off with the top story of the day here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
National rankings are out. BYU moves down in the coaches' top 25 poll. As of this recording here on Cougar Tracks, the AP top 25 has not been released, but the coaches' poll is out, and BYU drops. Barely a 69-0 win drops a team in the poll. BYU goes from 23 to 25 in the coaches' poll. And look, I understand with rankings, you tear it down every week. That's kind of my philosophy, like the playoff committee does, and then reset the board and rank them as you see fit. You try to avoid any preseason biases, ideally, but then also you're projecting a little bit, power ratings, things like that. But you want to look at the body of work, and I don't know if a 69-0 win against anybody, against Air, warrants dropping a team. But, hey, that's the coaches' poll. BYU moves down to 25. The Big 12 Conference on the coaches' poll has Arizona State staying at number 10. If you wanted to drop someone, probably could have dropped Arizona State after their lackluster penalty-filled game against Northern Arizona. They won 38-19. So they're the highest-ranked Big 12 team, cracking it at number 10. They moved up from number 11. Iowa State moves up 3 spots to number 18. Texas Tech moves up 1 spot to 23, and then BYU checks in at 25. Utah's the first team outside the poll. They had an impressive performance against UCLA, but that's the coaches' top 25 poll. Still waiting on the AP top 25. We'll probably have to hammer that out tomorrow on the program. But BYU is in a good place, obviously, after a week 1 performance that was pretty flawless. And a guy that led the charge for BYU was Bear Bachmeier. And it begs the question, what's the potential of the true freshman quarterback, Bear Bachmeier? What can he become? And he's a hot topic pretty much any week. Whenever you're a BYU starting quarterback, you're always going to be the focal point of really any game week. But this week, it's even bigger because it will be his first Power 4 opponent. And it just so happens to be the team that he left and is now no longer with. That's the Stanford Cardinal. And Bear, in last week's game, I thought was very good. It went better than anyone probably could have imagined for a true freshman in game 1. I thought Bear was excellent for BYU in that debut. And it just begs the question, like, what's the potential with him? And you look around the conference and you look at the landscape of college football right now. You know, if Bear continues to just make mistake-free football, there's enough talent around him where BYU could win a lot of ball games this season. Bear, 3 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground, no interceptions. There were a few passes that were a little, but I will also say to those passes, it felt like it was probably the right play. It was just maybe it sailed a little too high. Maybe a pass got batted up and it could have been picked off in the air. It wasn't where, oh my gosh, what throw are you making? What was that decision? And that's what impressed me the most, I think, with Bear Bachmeier, is that typically with a true freshman, you just expect there's going to be 2 or 3 of those plays where you're thinking, what were you thinking? I didn't have that moment with Bear. And I think that's something that's a positive coming out of that game. I think I would have liked to have seen maybe a few more drives in the third quarter. I know the game was out of reach and you're juggling that where it's 49 zip. You don't want to completely just put the foot on the gas against a lowly opponent, but to me, there was a lot of value to give Bear additional snaps. You're also juggling. You don't want to get him hurt. It was fine. It worked out okay, but just to get a few more snaps under the belt, I think would have been nice. Maybe a few more throws, but still, highly efficient night for Bear Bachmeier. And I think the potential for him is to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, potentially at some point in his career. I think that's the potential of him. I just think that he's got a perfect demeanor, personality to maybe win over a locker room as a true freshman. And I think that's an underrated aspect to all of this. When you're starting a true freshman, what do the veteran guys think? And everyone is saying all the right things. You know, that they're bought into Bear. They're impressed with his competitiveness, how much of a leader. I mean, he's being named a co-captain. That's all voted by the team. They're embracing him, and they've given their full support to Bear Bachmeier. And I just think there's a lot of positive momentum happening with Bear. I still probably think there's going to be a game or two that's laying in the weeds that we're not thinking about right now that probably gives BYU more headaches than we'd realize. And we still don't know yet how much to really learn from this BYU team after a performance against a terrible FCS team. But I still say, though, the sheer dominance of that game, that is noteworthy. We've seen BYU play bad FCS teams many times over the years. Didn't look that dominant all the time. Outside of the first 8 minutes, 10 minutes of the game, and even then it was like Portland State wasn't threatening much. They got that one third down that was picked up. BYU dominated Portland State and hammered them to the point where even Kalani Sitake was like, I watched the film and I even feel better about what I saw from this team. So the potential for Bear is that he could one day lead BYU to Big 12 glory. I do believe that. I think he's got that potential. And honestly, the coaching staff naming him the starter out of camp tells you that too, that they believe he can lead them to Big 12 glory. When you look around the league, excellent QBs. Josh Hoover was brilliant last night. Devin Dampier for Utah was excellent in his debut for the Utes. Rocco Becht has been excellent. Baron Morton got a little bit banged up with that shin. Soreness there, but I thought he looked good too until he got banged up. Bear maybe could be one of those really talented quarterbacks in a league that prides itself on the QB club that it's naming it this season. Another thing that's been a badge of honor for BYU is the fans, and Kalani Sitake was very proud of them and their performance on Saturday. Sold out crowd, 64,494 fans, largest crowd since 2009. The biggest point of pride for Kalani Sitake.
The biggest highlight for me as a head coach and for our program was the fans. We keep talking about it. I keep hearing the players talk about it in the locker room after the game, and even today you can hear the buzz going around about how amazing our fans were. So, I mean, school's not even in session yet, and the Rock was amazing, and so seeing the student section and all the fans and everybody supported, and they're loud too. So that was really impressive, man, to have that type of atmosphere. And since 2009, I was told. So that's super special. So just want to let the fans know how much we love and appreciate them. And man, they have been big time since I remember being part of the fan base when I was a little boy. So. It's nice to see them out doing their things and making noise for us.
Pretty cool comment from Kalani to Cougar fans. I mean, Kalani, like he's always said since day one, back in December 2015 at the BYU Broadcasting Building at his introductory press conference, he laid it out. He grew up a BYU fan, and he always makes it a point to give the flowers, the props to BYU fans when they showed up, and that atmosphere on Saturday was electric. You would have never known that was a game against an FCS team, so well done, BYU fans. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll start to know the foe, the Stanford Cardinal, as the Cougs get ready to take on an ACC foe. That sounds weird still. It's here on Cougar Tracks. It's powered by KSL Sports and KSL NewsRadio. Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. BYU versus Stanford kicks off on Saturday, 8:15 kick, late night inside LES, BYU after dark. Nothing better than that, right? BYU and the Cardinal, first time in Provo since 2003. Fourth meeting all time between the two programs that have really nothing in common. Let's call it what it is. BYU and Stanford just have nothing much in common, but Stanford leads the all-time series 2-1. Both their victories were in 2003 and then 2004. BYU won the last meeting back in 2022, the last regular season game as an independent football program. And Stanford football, man, it has been a rough time. You think about BYU, I point to BYU as one of the big success stories after COVID-19. BYU benefited greatly from COVID. They played that season in COVID, went 11-1, and cobbled up a schedule. And since, they got a Big 12 invite, and they've just been taken off and running, and the boosters are more inspired than ever before. The fans are more inspired than ever before. Cougar football is rolling. On the flip side, Stanford, I think there's no program that's been hit harder by COVID on the heels of that phase because it took a long time to kind of get back to some normalcy from the Bay Area, and they just never won. You think about Stanford. They haven't had more than 4 wins in a season since 2019. Now, 2020, they went 4-2, but still, more than 4 wins. They haven't done that. And then they get relegated from the Pac-12 to the ACC. They were kind of in the wilderness for a while until Notre Dame's AD kind of said, hey, Stanford and Cal need to be in a league with academic powerhouses that they are. They need to find a landing spot. And the ACC did them a solid, and they're coming in at a discount, but they're traveling cross-country. I mean, you think about the travel BYU has to do in the Big 12, it pales in comparison to Stanford. And Stanford made its travel even tougher going to Hawaii in week 0, which they lost 23-20. Stanford did. It was a back-and-forth game, kind of some crazy twists and turns. There was a fumble recovery by Stanford's defense in the Hawaii end zone. So many different kind of twists and turns, and then it ends on a field goal kick by a Hawaii kicker who learned how to kick through YouTube. It was a tough day on the islands for Frank Reich, the interim head coach, Andrew Luck, the GM of Stanford legend, to fall that way. But Stanford has had a week off, and they're putting all their pieces together to try to maybe pull off an upset against BYU, who's a 3-possession favorite. BYU is a massive favorite against Stanford. But I look at the Stanford team, and I don't think it's a game where BYU should be close with Stanford. But I do believe this is going to be a contest that Stanford could put up a fight. And it's not going to be like Portland State where you win, 69-0. This is going to be a much stiffer test going up against a Stanford team that's still got some personnel. Curious to see if former Olympus High player Scotty Edwards, if he gives it a go. He's listed on Stanford's depth chart this week. Last week, he did not play against Hawaii due to an undisclosed injury. But you look at Stanford's game against Hawaii, they had 4 drives, of 10 plays or more, one of which was a 20-play drive. Their opening drive of the season against Hawaii in week 0 was a 15-play drive. So this is going to be a Stanford football team that is going to look to eat up the clock. BYU's defense has to be ready to get off the field on third down. That is going to be critical for BYU in this game because Stanford, they want to eat up the clock. And they've got a little bit of proof of concept that they can do it. Now, Hawaii, not great. They got hammered by Arizona in week 1. Just destroyed. Arizona blew the doors off them. But, Stanford believes that, maybe they can clean a few things up and spring the upset. And look, if you can get first downs, move the chains, and if you can put together a 20-play drive, goodness gracious, if you can do that, you're going to have a chance as an underdog. So BYU's defense has to be dialed in. I would expect they will, but third down is going to be critical. Got to get off the field and make sure to avoid any sort of just chain movement. Get off the field as soon as possible. And if you do that, I think you're going to be in a good spot here because I don't look at Stanford's roster having much explosive playmakers in the passing game. They do have a good running back in Micah Ford. He ran for 113 yards last game against Hawaii. They haven't had much success with running backs. Last year they had a running quarterback, but Micah Ford's one to watch, number 20 for the Cardinals, or the Cardinal, excuse me. Their quarterback is Ben Goldbranson, Dr. Ben. He transferred in from Oregon State. He won the job. Maybe that could have been Bear Bachmeier. We'll see. But Kalani Sitake is keeping his guard up with the Stanford Cardinal because they know that with a bye week, they're going to throw some new wrinkles at BYU.
I think they have the upper hand in anything that they want to do. We have one game to look at. We can look at it's one of those moments where I trust Jay Hill and A-Rod and K-Pop. It's going to be a little bit getting over-prepared. I think we have to look at everything and try to get them ready for everything. There's some new things that happened. I mean, it happened in this game against Portland State. We weren't expecting some of the formations and some of the personnel sets that Coach Barnum gave us. And, it took a while for the first series for us to adjust to it. But once the defense adjusted to it, I think everything was going to be fine, and we had that in control. So we kind of expect that a little bit in this game. They're quality coaches. Those guys know how to get a team ready, and then there's good talent on that team. I mean, that's like I said, we recognize them. We recruited a bunch of those guys too. So they're going to be ready to go, and they have a week of rest and a week of preparation for us. So we've got to make sure that we're on top of our game when it comes to getting ready for this one.
I like that breakdown from Kalani Sitake, being over-prepared, because you got to imagine the wrinkles are going to be thrown. Stanford has nothing to lose. They're a huge underdog. This isn't a conference game. You have everything to gain if you're interim head coach Frank Reich with this game. And against a BYU team that is nationally ranked in the coaches poll, you've got everything to gain to build some momentum. Throw it out there. Throw some new wrinkles at BYU. So BYU has to be over-prepared. I thought that commentary from Kalani was really good because I think it fits the theme of this. And don't feel completely like you've arrived if you're BYU. I don't expect that they will. But sometimes when you're just getting all the pats on the back, wow, what a game, 69-0, you can maybe start to feel a little bit too good about yourself, start to get comfortable, and then you're maybe not putting out your best product. So it's going to be a good game. BYU and Stanford, 8:15 kick. We will have you covered on KSL News Radio. Coverage begins at 6 o'clock here on the legacy home of the Cougars. The game will be televised on ESPN. But that'll do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I will be back tomorrow with more insight into BYU and Stanford and player interviews coming up tomorrow here on KSL News Radio. Talk to you tomorrow.